So here's how this is going to work. First, we will briefly cover the 3 fundamentals. Then we will explore a step-by-step system divided into 5 phases of how to go from being clouded with brain fog to being able to go into flow effortlessly. And lastly, as a bonus, the last chapter will be my personal 30-day results and the challenges you should prepare for. The 3 fundamentals are sleep, exercise, and nutrition and hydration. Sleep is crucial, so here are 6 expert-recommended tips. Get sunlight or bright light in your eyes within 30 minutes of waking up. Avoid foods and beverages 3 hours before bed. At night, use as little light as needed, ideally towards the warmer spectrum. Sleep and wake up at roughly the same time every day. Sleep in complete darkness. And lastly, if you're not doing it already, be a nasal breather in order to prevent sleep apnea. Peter Attia is a medical doctor and a leading expert on longevity. He recommends a minimum of 2 hours per week of Zone 2 training, which is low-intensity cardio with 60 to 70% of your maximum heart rate, and 3 hours per week of strength training. There's more to add here, like VO2 max training and stability exercises, but that is beyond the scope of this video. There doesn't seem to be one diet to rule them all, although the Mediterranean diet has often been given that title. But when it comes to mental clarity, it seems that too much sugar and too little protein can decrease focus. Personally, I also like to do intermittent fasting, which helps me focus in the morning and also feel lighter. To know how much you need to drink approximately, here's the formula for you on the screen right now. Pause it if you need to, but the formula will also be in the description below. So now let's get to the really interesting part. Phase 1 is where you are full of brain fog and you can't focus on anything. This is the hardest to overcome. Assuming that you're getting decent amount of sleep and not drinking excessive amounts of alcohol or taking any drugs. Brain fog is likely due to 2 possible reasons: stress or overstimulation. There are also other reasons like hormonal imbalance or certain medications, but I'm assuming that most of you watching are not affected by those 2. Now, when it comes to overstimulation, you might have heard about a neurotransmitter called dopamine. It has often come up in the past few years in trends like dopamine detoxes and is often associated with pleasure and motivation. And as some of you might know, overstimulation can have a negative effect on dopamine levels. So this is why it's very important to take this seriously. How? The pleasure-pain balance. Pleasure and pain are processed in overlapping brain regions and work like a balance. It does not want to be tipped for very long to one side. Hence, every time the balance tips towards pleasure, powerful self-regulating mechanisms kick into action to bring it level again. That was an excerpt from the book Dopamine by Dr. D.O.P.A.M.I.N.E. I can highly recommend it if you really want to dive deep into this topic. Now, when we talk about pleasure and pain in this context, we don't necessarily mean physical sensations. Boredom is a pain, and watching something entertaining is a pleasure. The good news is we can get this natural balance back of how good or bad something feels, so that when we need to get something done, we feel clarity instead of this utter boredom. So here's the 8-step process that can not only treat the addiction of overstimulation, but also has had an 80% success rate of curing clinical depression induced from the addiction, according to Dr. Lemke. D stands for data. This is where we gather simple facts about our consumption habits, like how much and how often. O stands for objective. This is where we list the reasons for using. It could be as simple as boredom or getting a quick laugh, but it could also be deeper rooted reasons like depression, fear of missing out, anxiety, or anger about yourself or the world. P stands for problem. What are the problems that are caused by the habits? In this case, one problem would be overstimulation, but there could also be different problems like it negatively affecting your relationships. Now, A stands for abstinence, and this is where it gets tricky. According to Dr. Lemke, it takes her patients an average of 4 weeks of abstaining for them to not feel addicted anymore, and for the pleasure-pain balance to return to a healthy level. I will also have some interesting things to say about that when we get to my 30-day results. M stands for mindfulness. During those 4 weeks, observe how your brain feels and take notes. From my experience, probably very bored. I stands for insights. This is where you are done with the 4 weeks and you take notes on how you feel. N stands for next steps, and this is where you define how you want to move forward. Lastly, E stands for experiment, and this is very important to not miss out. Because even though you plan for the next steps in the last step, some of it might not go according to plan. A lot of people who try to moderate their usage go back to old habits quickly. So this is where it's important to check in with yourself frequently and then ask yourself if this is going the way you want it to. And then maybe even do a mini reset. Now, if you're not convinced yet, let me just say this one last thing before we move on to phase 2. Boredom forces you to notice the areas in your life where you're not happy and gives you the opportunity to do something about it. Even if stress is the main driver for your brain fog, adding slots of boredom gives your brain the ability to relax. When we consume something entertaining like the news or a Netflix show, it might feel like we are relaxing, but our brain still has to process the stimulus. So if you really want to give your brain some time off, be bored. After completing phase 1, we should be rid of brain fog, but don't feel completely clear just yet. This is where work is possible, but it lacks in quality because we get distracted easily. Luckily, this is much easier and faster to overcome. There are 2 practices that help. One is NSDR, which I'll explain in a moment, and the second is tidying up your environment. NSDR stands for non-sleep deep rest, and is a protocol that helps you replenish your dopamine levels so you have more motivation and focus when you go back to work. To my knowledge, it was coined by neuroscientist Andrew Huberman, and it's basically a guided body scan meditation where you sit or lie down and focus on different parts of your body while following a certain breathing pattern. It really helps you calm down your nervous system and just relaxes your mind, stop unproductive thinking like worrying, so you can approach whatever you need to with a much calmer mind. Additionally, if you have problems falling asleep, it can also really help with that. Personally, I used the guided NSDR protocol by Huberman himself. There will be a link in the description if you want to check it out. It is completely free. As an alternative, if you can't do NSDR for whatever reason, like when you are at your workplace perhaps, then try a wall break. I learned this little trick from Ryan Doris, who's an expert on flow, and it's a funny way to take a break. So if you feel that your focus is reducing and you can take a 5-minute break from work, find a blank wall and stare at it for 5 minutes straight. You will feel crazy at first, it will feel weird and uncomfortable, but if you remember the pleasure-pain balance from the last chapter, this is where we can use it for our advantage. When we give our brain those 5 minutes of boredom, we increase the pain side of the pleasure-pain balance, so you need less stimulation to feel normal again. So when we go back to work, it's more stimulating, thus increasing your motivation for it, thus increasing your focus for it, and everybody's happy. Now to your environment. I will keep this very short because this is so basic. Tidying up your environment reduces distractions, thus increasing your focus on what's important. A lot of things that really work are just that. Boring. So clean up the room. Once that is done, we should slowly see ourselves transition into phase 3. As we have minimized distractions and use NSDR or deliberate boredom whenever we need to refresh our minds, extended periods of work are possible, and you may even feel glimpses of flow. It's a state of mind where a person is fully immersed in an activity and sense of time seems to vanish and work feels effortless. This is where we want to get to, and we are not far off. So here are the 7 tools to get to phase 4. Number 1 is nudges and sludges. I will explain that in a second. Second is writing organized overview notes of everything that needs to be done. Removing even further distractions. My extreme example will follow. Spending time in nature. Cold exposure like ice baths or cold showers. Binaural beats. And lastly, the cause and effect diary. A nudge is anything that can politely push you to do a certain action or behavior. Like when a car starts beeping when you haven't put on your seatbelt. Versus a sludge, while the word itself has a different meaning in this context, it's anything that puts an obstacle in the way of a behavior or action. So it's the exact opposite. Cities use sludges when putting weirdly placed armrests on benches to prevent homeless people from sleeping on them. I'm borrowing those terms from the book Nudge by Richard H. Thaler and Cass R. Sunstein. It's a great book if you really want to dive deep into choice architecture. A good example for a nudge would be to pack your gym bag a day before so you're more likely to work out the next morning. An example for a sludge would be to install a web blocker that blocks certain sites like your email provider if you want to not use it at a certain time. Or if you want to write more, a good habit would be to place notepads around the house so you promote the habit. Pause the screen right now to see all of the examples that I have set up in my life. Now, when it comes to removing even further distractions, it really depends on how your brain works. I only do this from time to time, but when I really need to focus on something, I remove everything from my desk besides my computer, my notepad, and a timer so I know when to take breaks. And then I take it one step further by putting a barrier, which is a blue screen, in front of my desk so I can't see anything besides what I need to focus on. Like I said, I don't do this very often, only when I really need to focus on something, but when I do, it works wonders for my brain. You don't know what works until you try it out, so I encourage you to just experiment and see what works for you. Additionally, I top it off with binaural beats or brown noise, which sounds like the inside of an airplane, and then I can really focus for hours. And lastly, the cause and effect diary, or how I like to call it the if this then that list, is a database of consequences from certain actions that you create over a long period of time. Or in simpler terms, whenever you have a certain outcome from a specific action, whether positive or negative, you write it down. This will help you later down the line when you're feeling a certain way and you don't know what to do, and then you can take a look at your database and see what has worked for you in the past in that situation. For me, for example, I noticed that whenever I took a break by watching YouTube videos, I rarely ever felt better afterwards, sometimes even worse. For the cause and effect diary would be, If exhausted and need of break, then don't watch YouTube for an hour. Be radically honest with yourself and get empirical evidence to see what really helps you. Here are 3 examples from my list. Number 1, don't consume content out of boredom. Number 2, when lost in life, be offline for a day, if possible in nature. And number 3, when feeling sleepy, use a daylight lamp for 10 minutes. Phase 4 is where everything is optimized and you can handle difficult tasks with ease and flow. You have a healthy relationship with stimulations and you give your brain regular breaks. But I want to give you one last step that will not only ensure that you will sustain mental clarity, but will also give you a deeper insight into yourself and where you want to go in life. So if you decide to stay, imagine this. You are on your daily commute. You might be listening to music or just existing, waiting to get to wherever you need to go. But then something happened. Might have been an accident or a sudden heart attack. Help was on its way, but it was too late. You are gone, and you will create no new memories. Death exercises sound morbid, but they are a powerful way to look at your life as an observer. But instead of asking yourself vague questions like, did I make the most of my time? Or did I give more than I took? I want you to look at your average Tuesday. While you were still alive, when did you wake up? Were you regularly stressed during any time of the day? Were you at work, at home, or somewhere else? And for how long? What was your thinking pattern? And why? Was it overall positive or negative? And on and on. And if you repeat this process for the rest of the week, you will have a practical overview of what your life was like when you died. Sure, there would have been a vacation here and there or a special event, but those are rare. Now ask yourself, if you were to get a second chance at life, 10 years from now, would you want your life to look like it did? How about 5 years? How about a year from now? If the answer is yes, that is great. Figure out what you would need to do to maintain that. If the answer is no, what would you rather have your average Tuesday and Wednesday and so on look like? What would your relationship with work be? What would you do afterwards? How would you greet your loved ones? As luck would have it, a slot just opened up for you to go back. There is one condition, however. If you want things to be different a year from now, you have to change it now. So what 3 steps can you take today to get you closer to that ideal average week? And what 3 steps can you take tomorrow and the day afterwards? Being specific is important because it removes the excuse of not knowing what to do. This is not about finding your purpose. This is about reassessing your life, seeing if it's going in the right direction and adjusting accordingly. Now, on top of doing a death exercise, here are 3 more activities that can really help you deepen your connection with yourself. Meditation, journaling, and altruism. I don't think I have to explain meditation and journaling, but there's a unique subcategory I recently learned about from Tim Ferriss called a past year review. Tim usually does this at the end of the year, but you can do this anytime. In it, you take a look at your calendar and your photos that you took for the last 12 months, and then you see what were the positives, what were the negatives. And then you analyze it. What were the 20% of the ups and downs that had the biggest impact on your life? And once you have that, you can plan your next 12 months to implement more of the goods and try to minimize the bad. Obviously, there will always be people and situations that you can't avoid, but even just being 10% happier makes a difference. Now, what might stick out in this list is altruism. There is a positive correlation between your happiness and how much you give back, but that shouldn't be the main reason why you do it. Making someone laugh is giving back, but also donating to a charity, surprising your loved ones, giving someone a compliment, listening to a friend in need, and on and on. There's an endless list of things you can do to improve the lives of the people and the environment around you. Here's a nice low-cost idea of what I recently put into action. There are some organizations out there that plant 1 tree for $1. So now, for every month that I am alive, 1 tree is being planted. Assuming that 50% of those trees survive and I don't make any further donations, by the time I'm 80 years old, there will be 300 trees that weren't there before. I might not build a forest, but together we can. But if we all just gave back a little bit, it can quickly build up and really change the lives of the people and the environment around us. Congratulations, we are now in the final phase. While the steps I outlined in this video are simple, it is very hard to get to this point. For some of you it might take weeks, for others months, but I'm hoping that with this video I gave you a clear path that can motivate you. If you feel like you have all the information you need, you can skip this next chapter, but I think that hearing the experience from someone who recently just started from zero can really help. So here were the rules that I set myself. Absolutely no social media or videos of any kind. That means no YouTube, no Netflix, or no movies, no series, no nothing. No digital entertainment. The only things that were allowed were articles, but no news articles. To be completely transparent with you, I made some exceptions during those 30 days. I watched 2 movies with my girlfriend. I watched one 10-minute software tutorial and one 5-minute origami tutorial that I set to black and white to minimize distractions. But those were all the exceptions that I made. During those 30 days, I wrote in my journal almost every single day so I can give you an accurate overview of what it was really like. During the first few days, I didn't really miss entertainment that much because I was kind of busy, so I didn't get to do it anyways. I wrote down, now that I have more time to just sit still and be bored, I can plan ahead for some tasks that need to be done in the next month or so. I also tidied up my room and finished a couple of smaller tasks that have been on my to-do list for a while, but I've been postponing. But by the end of the first week, the boredom really started to set in. This is when I started to journal a lot. Mainly, I wanted to do a lot of inner work and finding more things out about myself. I asked myself questions like, what would I be if I had $10 million in the bank? Or how can I be kinder to myself? I sometimes did this for hours every day because I just had nothing better to do. But when I asked myself the question, what would I need to do this week for me to look back on this week and be proud of myself, things kind of started to change in the second week. From utter boredom to kind of being more productive in the free time that I had freed up. Don't get me wrong, most of the time I was still utterly bored, but I could feel that my urge to do simple things was growing. By the end of the second week, I got a bit lost in unimportant activities, but that were allowed to do. Like, for example, I would look for the term AI news multiple times a day just to see if something happened. And also there is a website called boredpanda.com. I'm not sure if you know it, but you can go down a rabbit hole there very quickly. I didn't notice it at the time, but that was definitely a new addiction growing. Although it didn't have as big of an impact as binge watching a bunch of YouTube videos would have. But it still distracted me from the important activities that I wanted to do, like reading, working out, talking to a friend, and just activities in general that for me means a quality life. During that time, I also felt the first cravings to watch YouTube videos again. Despite that, here's what I wrote on day 13. In all honesty, it's going great. My room is the tidiest it's been in months, my head is much clearer, and I've got more meaningful work done. I also started meditating again, not because I have nothing better to do, but because I felt the urge to do it. Boredom might be boring, but it pushes me to make my life more meaningful by giving me a pause button on everything all around me, nagging at my attention, thus making it possible to approach life with a more relaxed and clear mind. That was a long sentence. I did actually write that. During week 3, I dove even deeper and got more and more honest with myself of where I am in life right now and where I want to go. I asked myself more practical questions like, if I want to be at this point in 3 months, what would I actually need to do today and tomorrow and the day afterwards and so on to actually go there practically? Not just some vague definitions of I need to live a quality life, but like actually what is the step that I need to take? Ironically, I also felt a little bit lost during that time. I wrote down, I wonder if my sudden feeling of being lost emerged because of the boredom or if it revealed itself through the boredom. That same night, after I wrote those words, something crazy happened. I had a dream of one of my goals coming true, and I actually had like a tear in my eye when I woke up. And it was such an amazing feeling. It was because it was just the night after I felt very lost, and it felt like it was my subconscious reaching out to me because I was just putting so much work in and trying to connect with it that it told me, you're not lost, you're on the right path, it's just hard. Despite that awesome dream, on that same day at 3 p.m, I wrote, feeling super bored and having zero motivation for work. I don't even want to watch a movie because that would make me feel bad deep down because it's not worth my attention. So as you can see, while overall I was feeling better and better, it was more like a roller coaster. And that was the hardest part. So one day I might feel super focused and super good, and the next day I would just crash down, have zero motivation, and just be bored and just can't get myself to do whatever I want to do. Prepare for that. Don't think that it will get better every single day. It will be ups and downs. But despite the challenges, I managed to stick to the rules because I just knew it was important. Day 28 was one of my highlights. It was a weekend and I woke up around half an hour before my girlfriend. The sun was shining and the weather was nice, so I sat down and wrote in my journal, what a beautiful day. I have absolutely no urge to use digital devices or the internet today. If I could teleport myself, I would just want to be in a hut by a lake in the forest to look at nature and ride a boat. While that last part sadly didn't come true, the only time when we used the internet that day was to plan our trip to Prague on Google Maps. I think the rest of the day we went to the gym, cooked foods, just talked and hung out, and it was very relaxing and I didn't feel bored at all. I just really enjoyed the time. So it took my brain until those last couple of days to really reset. So what Dr. Anna Lemke wrote in her book really was true for me, and it took 4 weeks for my pleasure-pain balance to be at a healthy level again. On my last day I wrote, I'm still not sure how to transition to a new normal. I find deep focus in reading long blog posts and articles that wasn't there before. I think more clearly, my head feels lighter, I'm more organized, less images and thoughts are crowding my mind, and I'm more relaxed because I plan more ahead. I have no intention of giving those benefits up in exchange for some quick hits of dopamine. And there you have it. If that doesn't sell you, I don't know what will. Now, around a month after the experiment was over, I noticed some of my old habits creep back. It was still like a healthy amount, but I noticed a negative trend. That's why the last part of the dopamine process is super important. Just removing all the rules for myself and hoping that I will continue to do these healthy habits did not work. Realizing this, I took another micro reset where I tried to reassess the rules around the habits, so I really focus on quality time over these quick hits of dopamine. This might sound a little bit harsh, like why wouldn't you just enjoy yourself? But this is actually the whole point. The entertainment I get from watching YouTube videos most of the time, or Netflix shows, it is fun, it is entertaining, but usually, like if we zoom out like a year from now, I probably won't remember even the most impactful videos I watched. So instead of focusing on that, I think that for me, a quality life is where I do things that I, even a year from now, remember and that add value to my life. And that is it. Now, if you feel like that something was missing in the video and you want me to address it, just don't hesitate to ask me in the comments. I reply to them all. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, there's a link in the description where I created a page for all of the sources and resources that I used for this video or created myself. So I really hope that you can get a lot of value from that as well. This was a bit of an experiment. I never did such an instruction-heavy video and also not such a long video. It was probably boring, and I'm sorry for that. So even the more thanks to you for still sticking around. But because I've been into this topic for so long now, I just felt that I needed to make this video because I have so much to share. And I hope that you found value in that. Now, if I have one last thing to say to the few of you who are still watching, if you really want to help yourself out, stop watching the people living the life you want and do the hard thing and get it yourself. Thank you for watching. Ah, my legs are killing me. I was sitting on the floor the whole time, just had this pillow. Man, this is not a desk, this is like for TVs. So yeah, there's that. See ya.